Wow. You ever hear of Charlie Wilson's War? Yeah, there was a movie made of that name, of that title. Charlie Wilson was an American congressman from Texas who went over to Afghanistan when the Soviets, this was back when they were Soviets, when the Soviets occupied that country and were trying to hang on to it. Keep in mind, Afghanistan is sitting on $1 trillion or more worth of natural resources, mostly in the form of rare earth minerals. But it's also been an area that's, it's strategic. They wanted to build, there's for a long time, there's been this goal to build a pipeline from Turkmenistan through Afghanistan, across Pakistan, and into India to supply oil to a series of power plants that in part were built by General Electric, but others. And, the Soviets would like that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons why. And also Afghanistan was problematic for the Soviets in that they were providing, Afghanistan is like the world's leading supplier of opium. And the first year of the Bush administration, George W. gave Mullah Omar some 40 million bucks, and publicly, in exchange for burning the poppy fields, and opium poppy production crashed. And because Afghanistan represents about half the world's opium production, the price of heroin doubled, tripled, quadrupled in Russia and Europe and the United States. And heroin deaths and addiction and HIV infections and overdoses dramatically dropped in 2001 and early 2002. But we're no longer doing that. We're no longer paying the Taliban to burn the opium crops. In fact, opium production is at an all-time high. But anyhow, back to Charlie Wilson's War. Charlie Wilson went over there and said, we should help these guys. They don't want the Soviets in there. The Soviets, they're communists, they're bad guys, they're our enemies. It's the Cold War. And so why don't we arm some freedom fighters? Why don't we give them some weapons? And so they got together this collection of this ragtag band of freedom fighters who were, among whom was a Saudi guy by the name of Osama Bin Laden. And we gave them lots of money and lots of weapons, and sure enough, they kicked the Soviets right flat out of Afghanistan. Killed thousands of Soviets in the process, Soviet soldiers. Sped up, arguably, the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Geopolitical strategic goal achieved. And then if you saw the movie or you read the book, Charlie Wilson went back to Congress and said, okay, the country's been at war for a decade or more. The infrastructure is in ruins. Shouldn't we appropriate, we've appropriated billions for this. Shouldn't we appropriate a few $100 million to build schools and rebuild the cities before we just walk away? And Congress said, no, we're not going to do that. And so the Taliban came in and said, we will. And they started building schools. They were madrasas, but they were schools. And the Taliban, they didn't argue on behalf of or against any one particular tribe or region of Afghanistan. And so across Afghanistan, people said, they may be a little crazy and they want women to wear burqas and not go to school, but it's better than what we had. And the Taliban needed money, and Osama bin Laden, he had taken on the Soviets, and he was the kind of guy who kind of got PO'd at people, and he was looking around going, okay, who else am I PO'd at? Saddam Hussein, Iraq. He hated Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was the leader of and a Sunni no less, the leader, as was bin Laden, the leader of the, arguably one of the largest and most prosperous Arab countries in the world. And he let women go to college. He let them walk around without headscarves. He let them work. He let them drive. This highly offended bin Laden. So he, with all this American money and weaponry and the military skills that he had acquired, and his buddies went back to Saudi Arabia and went right up to the border of Iraq to invade Iraq. At which point the king of Saudi Arabia said, okay, enough of that, and had him captured, arrested, stripped him of his citizenship, and deported him to Sudan, which is where his mother was from. And from there, Bin Laden went to Afghanistan and said, I got a bunch of money to the Taliban. Will you let me buy, 20,000 acres here and build a sort of like Blackwater, a shooting range? And they said, sure. And you can draw a pretty straight line from that to 9/11. So we funded 9/11, arguably. And Charlie Wilson takes the credit and the blame for that, because he did it very publicly. I think Charlie Wilson has passed on now. I may be wrong, but he's an old man now. So now comes this story, broken in the Atlantic yesterday by Steve Clemens. And the headline is, Thank God for the Saudis, ISIS, Iraq, and the Lessons of Blowback. See, 9/11 was blowback. In fact, there have been several books of that title pointing out that basically our intervention in Afghanistan against the Soviets led directly to 9/11. I mean, there were pieces in the middle. The thing that Bin Laden was really PO'd about with us was that we had kept an Air Force base on Saudi soil, sacred Saudi soil, where men were drinking alcohol and women were driving cars and showing their bare arms. It was put there for George Herbert Walker Bush's little war against Saddam, the Kuwait War. And it stayed. It stayed there until, I think, 2004 or 2005, when Bush finally closed it. But Bin Laden said he was going to attack America if we didn't close our Air Force base in Saudi Arabia. And sure enough, he attacked us. But at least Charlie Wilson did it all out in the open. John McCain told CNN's Candy Crowley back in January of this year, thank God for the Saudis and Prince Bandar. Remember Bandar Bush, the guy that was literally kissing on the lips George W. Bush, walking and holding hands with him down in Crawford, Texas, back during the Bush administration? Bandar Bush, they called him. He was so close to the Bush family. Well, Prince Bandar went from being the Saudi ambassador to the United States to being the head of Saudi security. And the essence of what Steve Clemens is saying is that when Obama failed to throw lots and lots of weapons into Syria to the Sunni fighters, John McCain went to Prince Bandar and said, hey, would you do this? And Bandar said, well, I can't, our government can't officially do it, but there's lots and lots of millionaires in Saudi Arabia. Raised a bunch of money, gave it to a bunch of Sunni militiamen in Syria to help overthrow Assad, the Alawite government. And those Sunnis, those Sunni fighters, armed with Saudi money at the request of John McCain, just kept right on going into Iraq, and today we call them ISIS. ISIS. Yeah. That group. The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or the ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Should we call this John McCain's war?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It seems to me this is the most underreported story in the news right now. John McCain manages to screw up everything.